Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. This morning, our subject is Who then is the fourth man? Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, once asked the question, did we not place three men in the fiery furnace? So who then is the fourth man in the furnace, that fiery furnace? That's our subject today. Because it seems like life is so lived and structured by circumstances that we're either in a fire, going into a fire, or we're coming out of a fire. That's how it seems to us. That the heat of circumstances are such that we're in the fire, whether it's political fire, economic fire, emotional fire, psychological fire, whatever the fire is, we know that there is one who keeps us from not being singed and burned in that fire. And this morning we want to look at that through the story of the three Hebrew men that were taken captives. But before I do that, I hope that a cerebral cortex will be such that we can recognize what Yah is actually saying to us this morning. And we may then, by reading and understanding, celebrate in ebullient fashion divine utterance as they come to us. So turn with me to the book of Bereshit, that's Genesis, and we're going to dilate a little on chapter 32. The word here says, and Jacob on his way, and the angels of Elohim met him. We know the story very well, that Jacob had stolen his brother's birthright. He then went to spend time with his mother's brother, Laban. And Laban means that he was a different complexion from the rest of them. He was an albino, that's what Laban means. He was different. And we often see that in parts of the Caribbean and even in Africa, they're albino. And so he was an albino. And that's where he's coming from. But he's intimidated by the fact that his brother Esau is on his way to meet him. And he finds himself in that tricky situation. He doesn't know what his brother is thinking. And he's going into a fire, having just left a fire. But perhaps he could ask the same question. Who is that who keeps him? We know that he who keepeth Israel neither slumber nor sleep. He is a shade up on the right hand. And so the word wants us to know that Jacob decided that he would give his brother some gifts. But he's not sure whether his brother would receive the gifts. But what I want to focus on really is from about verse 27. Come with me there, verse 27 of chapter 32 of Genesis. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. This is Yeshua now asking Jacob, what's your name? And the question is very significant because prior to that, Jacob had told his father that his name was Esau. And everything that you do is recorded. And you have to be held account for it. So he's being held account now for that. Having said that, so what is your name? What is your name? Because the word said he had found a place. He wrestled with Yeshua. He wrestled with him. Now, sometimes we think that this is a physical wrestling. How can a man wrestle with Yah? And the word said he wrestled with a man until it was daybreak. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was put out of joint. And he wrestled with him, and he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Yishrael, Prince of Elohim. For thou hast striven with Elohim and with man, and has prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, wherefore is it that you dost ask after my name? And he blessed him, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. Peniel, the face of El. For I have seen Elohim face to face, and my life is preserved. The word says that Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, whatever way you pronounce that. Now, as we look at this, we recognize that this kind of wrestling that took place was more of an intellectual wrestling. It was a issue of the mind, the thinking, where his cerebral cortex was in action here, thinking, because the pineal gland sits in the center of the brain, and it's a real place within us. And so this is how Jacob really wrestled with Yeshua. It's a special gland that ancient people call it the third eye. And so he was thinking. That's what was happening. So as we look at this through the faculty of thought, we recognize that this gland, this tiny endocrine gland in the middle of the brain, it helps us, and it regulates the body's circadian rhythm, our behavior, secreting the hormone of melatonin. This is what it does. It controls everything that we do. And this is how Jacob actually saw Yeshua, through the pineal gland. And we need to understand that. And this is why when Yeshua was talking to the people in Matthew chapter 6, you better come with me there, and we will look at verse 22 to 24, because the word says that if thine eye be single. It's not talking about your two eyes. If your eye be single, singular, thy whole body is full of light, because the pineal gland has an association with light. But if thine eye be evil, here it is again, it doesn't say high, but if thine eye singular be evil, it's talking about the pineal gland, your thoughts. The whole body shall be full of darkness. So when the word says that gross darkness is coming up on the land, it's saying it's almost as if the pineal gland of each person in the society is closed down and they're not thinking right. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, listen to me. It says, if therefore the light, the pineal gland, which is the light in you, is in darkness, how great is that darkness? It's gross. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve two masters. And I'm not talking about your degrees. And so we need to understand that the eyes, your eyes, are only the lens through which the brain looks. Your eyes. We need to understand that. And so the cerebral cortex is responsible for the higher level processes of human behavior. We need to understand it in language, in memory, in reasoning, and even when we're problem solving, we're dealing with the cerebral cortex through which the eye speaks, that pineal gland. So when Jacob named the place Peniel, he's saying, this is where I reasoned with. Yeah. This is where I wrestled intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. This is where I wrestled with him. And he overcame. And he said, your name no longer is Jacob. You're no longer a supplanter. Your name is going to be Yishrael. You have overcome. And so I wanted that backdrop, that to understand where we're going in our understanding of our subject today. Because we want to look at Daniel. And if you turn with me to the book of Daniel, chapter 3, Daniel chapter 3, it says that Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, throughout the passage, you see the term, he set it up. He was setting the people up. The people were being set up, not only the image. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains of the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes and the governors and the captains and the judges and the treasurers and the counselors and the sheriffs and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. There it is again. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages. Understand that. This is international. This is not a provincial district. It says nations. He wants all nations to adhere to this, to bow to this image. I hope you see where I'm going with this, because this is linked to Revelation chapter 13, because Luke, Dr. Luke, speak of this, of the time of the Gentiles. And the time of the Gentiles stretches all the way from Nebuchadnezzar to the anti-Messiah or the Antichrist that we read of in Daniel chapter 11. So when the Bible talks about the times of the Gentiles, we need to understand that it relates to the 2 feet and the image that Nebuchadnezzar dream we read of in chapter 2. Because he's telling you some great powers are going to come on the earth. The first is Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and the 4th kingdom later on will split into 2. These are all Gentile nations, and so these are the times of the Gentiles. We need to understand that. And so here, this is the precursor of what is going to happen in the end time according to Revelation chapter 13. So if you understand this, you will know what's coming. Let me say also that when Nebuchadnezzar came to besiege Jerusalem, and he did that 3 times, but the first time he came as a general, because his father, Nebuchadnezzar, is his father, later died, so he became king. So we read here in chapter 3 that he is king. And if you read the Septuagint in the same passage, the Septuagint tells us that this happened in the 18th year of his reign. The 18th year of his reign. The King James doesn't tell you that, but the Septuagint does. Says this happened in the 18th year of his reign. So understand something here. When he became king, he inherited from his father these counselors, these wise men, these Chaldeans. And he wants to test them to see whether or not they're really good counselors. So we had a dream in chapter 2, we read, and he wants to know if these men are worthy of their retainers. Are they good counselors? You know, if you're going to employ an attorney, you want to know it's a good attorney. So these men were counselors and astrologers, men of the occult, some of them. And so Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, but he couldn't remember the dream. So, of course, he wants to know if these men were really men of the trade. He says, tell me the dream. Tell me the dream. So chapter 3 is a response to chapter 2. Because there was also a uprising, we're told, in the kingdom. And this was like to see who is on his side. There was a vote of no confidence, and he's now wanting to see who is on his side, which give him, you know, politicians do this all the time. They say, you know, I became prime minister, or I became president, you know, but the people didn't elect me. He got his position by way of the death of his father. So he wants to see who is on his side. And so he established this image. And whoever danced to it, so perhaps a subheading would be the fawning symphony, where men genuflect on their faces before the king, being obsequious. So it's kind of a symphony. And notice that it is six instruments. Let's read it again. Verse 4, chapter 3. Then an herald cried aloud to you in the it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kind of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Hold your finger there and come with me to Azon or Chizaon chapter 13. That's Revelation chapter 13. And if we read from verse 14, it says, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles that he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an idol. Make a what? An idol. Make an image to the beast. Just like Nebuchadnezzar, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power, of course he has power, just like Nebuchadnezzar, to give life unto the idol and to the beast. And the idols of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship. Did you hear that? Nebuchadnezzar said everyone in his kingdom should worship the image, should bow down and dance. And so Revelation here, what is telling you, what happened then in chapter 3 of Daniel is scheduled to happen in these last days that we live. Whoever is not worshiping this beast should be killed. And he calls it all. How many? All, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. And that no man might buy or sell, save he had the mark of the name of the idol or the beast, of the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the idol of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his name is 600 threescore and 666. You understand that? So come with me back to Daniel. We're told that he made an image and of gold. The height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits, 90 feet high. And most scholars and theologians have assumed that the image here in chapter 3 is in relation to the image that he dreamt about in chapter 2. They think it's the image of a man. And you see pictures of these all the time. People, give artist impressions of the image. But as you read here, it tells you that the measurements are not the ratio of a man. The ratio here is 10-1. Not the measurement, not the ratio of a human being. Therefore, we might well conclude that this is not an image of a man, but the measurements given here are most consistent with the measurements of an obelisk. An obelisk. Now, you know what an obelisk is, but let me tell you what an obelisk is. An obelisk is a phallic symbol. And you see them all over the world. You go to Istanbul, it's there. You go to Central Park in New York, you will see one there. You go to Rome, you will see one at St. Peter's Square. If you go to Washington, the Washington Monument, which is perhaps the highest of all of them, 555 feet. If you go to Egypt, you'll see one there. You go to London, you will see one there. These are phallic symbols, meaning they represent, in part, the male organ. And perhaps you ought to be mindful enough to ask yourself the question, why is it that all these cities of the world are displaying in public view a phallic symbol with the same measurement or similar measurement of that which Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, established in chapter 3? Why? So the king says, when you hear this, you will dance. And whoso falleth not down and worship it shall the same hour be cast in the midst of the fiery furnace. Did you get that? Now, when I read that, my mind is also driven to my experience working for British Steel as an apprentice. Because I worked in an environment where I understood what a blast furnace is. The last blast furnace I worked in was called Elizabeth. And that blast furnace was able to produce, like, in its heyday, 7,000 tons of molten metal per week. And when you heat that furnace up to its upper critical point to tap out that metal, it's really hot. You're talking about thousands of degrees Fahrenheit. And if that's not, then I also worked in an open heart furnace. And the temperatures there are the same. So I know and I see with my own eye when you tap the molten metal and put it into a ladle and then separate the slag from the metal itself, then transfer that into a pickling vault with acid and transfer that to the rolling mills. I understand when the word says, and they heated it up 7 times greater than it was. I don't know how hot it is, but think of a blast furnace that has 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit and you multiply that by 7. It was hot. And so he's saying, those who do not fall on the ground and worship this image, they will be killed. That's what Revelation 13 is telling us. And unless there is this fourth man, unless there is this man in the fire with you that the world is planning for Yah's people, then you'll burn. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and language fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar king had set up. Can you remember any time in recent years when the whole world was had come together by way of the imposition of politics to do something that they didn't want to do. Perhaps you remember what happened during the era of COVID. It was that kind of situation that happened back in Babylon. But we also want to make sure you understand who we're dealing with or what kind of people we're dealing with. What kind of people? So if you come with me to 2 Kings and chapter 20, you will understand where I'm going with this. This is dealing with Hezekiah the king, who is part of the house of David. It says, in those days, Hezekiah was sick unto death, and the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos, came to him and said unto him, get your house in order. And we know the story very well, that he prayed and he asked that I'll give you 15 years more on your life. But if we turn to verse 17, he says, he's telling him because some men from Babylon came to pay him respect, and what he did, he showed them all his attainments and his house and everything that he had, rather than give glory to Yah for having healed him. He didn't do that. So Isaiah came back to him and told him that everything or everybody in Judah is going to be taken down to Babylon. Now let's read it, verse 17. Behold, the days come that all this is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day shall be carried unto Babylon. Nothing shall be left, said Yah. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then it said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, good is the word of Yahweh which thou hast spoken. And he said, is it not good if peace and truth be in my days? Now, I read that text to give you an understanding of who the people were that were taken from Jerusalem, from Judah, and taken to Babylon. Because we need to trace this, because too often we misunderstand what is happening. So the point here is Hezekiah. And so come with me to Zephaniah, Stephanas. In chapter 1 of Stephanas, it says, the word of Yahweh which came to Stephanas, the son of Cush. So we understand that Stephanas here is a man of bronze. He's a black man, and he's a prophet. And he says he's the son of Cush. We know that Am had 4 sons, and Cush is Ethiopia. We know that. We know Mizraim is Egypt. Put is Libya. We know all that. Are you with me? So he says he's the son of Cush and the son of Gedaliah. Gedaliah, we also know, during the same period, was the governor of Judah. This is a generation of black leaders. Let not anybody teach you differently, because the word is letting you know, the prophet is saying that he's the son of Cush, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah. So if he's the son of Hezekiah, that's the lineage in the days of Josiah, the son of Amos, king of Judah. So he gives you that lineage. And he's saying, I belong to Hezekiah, who belongs to David. These men who are in Babylon, including Daniel, Ezekiel, they're black. That's what the word wants you to know. That's what he's trying to tell us. And so we understand even after this, when Babylon was captured by the Medes and Persians, and King Ahasuerus was now king. It's the same empire, but it says the empire stretched all the way from India to Ethiopia. So we know the coloration of the people. So when we read about Daniel, which we're now reading, and his three friends who are noted in scripture here, we're talking about our ancestors. We're talking about our ancestors. We are not talking about Caucasian people. Caucasians are Asians who lived in the Caucasus Mountain in parts of Russia and elsewhere. The cuneiform tablets in the British Museum will testify to that fact. Many of these people originated in Turkey, and they adapted to Judaism in the 6th and the 7th century. And this is the people to which Yeshua referred to in Revelation 2 and verse 9 and Revelation 2 and verse 9. He said, these are the synagogue of Satan. Why? He said, they say they're Jews, but they're not Jews. I've gone that way to show you from the word of Yah that the line of David, the Bible says David was ruddy. He was ruddy, meaning blood color. Adama, meaning black from the earth. He was ruddy, beautiful. And his son obviously would follow him, who fell in love with that Shumalite woman who wants you to know she's black and she's comely. And therefore, we ought to know also when David called Bathsheba, looked out from his veranda and saw her bathing and called her Bathsheba, meaning she is the daughter of Sheba. Are you with me? I just want you to know the coloration of the people we're dealing with. Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, is the daughter of Sheba. And perhaps if you come with me to Bereshit chapter 10, and we will read verse 6. And the sons of Ham are Cush and Mizraim, Put and Canaan. You get that? Let's say that in another way. The sons of Ham, Ethiopia, Egypt, Libya, and Canaan. That's what he's saying. And the sons of Cush, Seba, and Avila, and Sabta, and Rama, and Sabtika, and the sons of Rama, Sheba. There's Sheba, all coming from the children of Ham. Sheba is one of the children of Ham. And so if you're the daughter of Sheba, it means that Sheba was the black daughter of Ham, who David called. And so Solomon coloration. I'm laboring this point because I think for too long over the years, grown men claiming to be wise are preaching to a people and teaching them things that are not in the scriptures. Everybody know that Mizraim is a land of black people. At least it was then. David himself called it the land of Ham, people of burnt faces. So how then could Moses be in the land of Ham, hiding among the people who were black, and nobody noticed him if he was Caucasian? How? How could Joseph's brother went down to Egypt if he was Caucasian and they didn't recognize their own brother among the people of burnt faces? How? How could Yeshua himself, if he was this blue-eyed European that they depict him to be, how could that be? The word, John tells us, Yohanan, that he has feet like burning brass and he has hair like wool. Ezekiel tells us that he had locks. Only black people have locks. So I've gone that way to let you know who we're dealing with. These are our ancestors, and they're letting you know that if you're not careful, you'll end up in the same thing again. Because we are not the Gentiles. It tells us who the Gentiles are. Let me remind you who the Gentiles are. You already know it, but replication doesn't harm anything. It just concretizes it in your mind. Come with me to the same chapter 10 of Genesis, and we read, now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them were sons born after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tubal and Meshach and Tiras. And the sons of Gomer, the sons of who? Gomer, Ashkenaz. Now, we know that 90 plus percentage of the people who are now claiming to be Israelite or to be Jews, they're Ashkenazi. But Moses here, a man who took dictation from Yah on Mount Sinai, is letting you know. He says, by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided by their lands, everyone after his own tongue, after their families and their nations. We also know that the Apostle Paul was struck down on Damascus Road according to Acts chapter 9. And then he was told he must take the gospel to all the Gentile world. But we see no evidence in Scripture where Saul ever went to Africa. Now, that ought to intrigue you. The man is called and is given a divine task to take the message to the Gentile. He went to Greece. He went to Rome. He went all over the place, but he never went to Africa. Why? Well, Genesis 10 is letting you know what happened. So let's go back to Daniel chapter 3. Now you know who we're dealing with. It is your ancestors. And that's why you are catching the same kind of fire politically and otherwise. Educationally, you are in the fire because the leaders of this world, they are like Nebuchadnezzar. They are setting images for you and setting you up. And you are dancing. Not only are you dancing, you're singing for them because Yah has blessed us with the great voices of our people. And that's why when we read Psalm 137, and the same Babylonian came to the people of Israel, our people, and they said to them, sing us one of the songs of Zion. They said, no, we can't sing Yah's song in a strange land. We cannot sing our song in captivity. But you go to Hollywood today, go to New York, go to Washington. Our people are singing song because of checkbooks of producers. Are you with me? We're singing. No, you can't sing for them. Not only are we singing, we're dancing. Now, Nebuchadnezzar says, if you don't dance, you'll die. That's what we're dealing with. The prophetic application of Daniel chapter 3. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 3. Now, the word says, wherefore at the time, this is verse 8, certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. Did you get that? Now, what's human nature here? Perhaps you will see it. These men who could not tell Nebuchadnezzar the dream in chapter 2 because they did not have it. They were not erudite enough. They did not have the acuity, the mental acuity to explain to him. They did not have that. They were not sagacious enough. And the word says uh, Daniel spoke to the man that was in charge and asked for time so he can provide the perspicuity of the dream, and went back and basically saved their lives. You would think that these men, these Chaldeans, they would be grateful to Daniel. No, they were setting him up now. That's human nature. You do things for them, and they turn against you treacherously. That's what we're dealing with. This is part of the end time scenario when the word says your own brothers and your own sisters will turn against you. That's what happened. Let's read it again for emphasis. It says, then at that time, verse 8, certain Chaldeans. You know, Chaldea or Chaldean is a generic term. But these Chaldean, they were a specific group of people to whom skills were assigned to them. They were men of the occult, and they were men who thought to themselves that they had powers to do certain things. They came to the king, and they spake to him, and they flattered the king and arrested his ego. Listen to them. O king, live forever. They're telling the king he must live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree. And I would not rule out the fact that these men were the same one who drafted the laws for the king, because Daniel, in explaining the dream to the king, had embarrassed them and made them ashamed, because they were claiming to be wise, but they did not understand what Yah was doing, because they were not schooled in that way as Daniel. In chapter 1, we are told Daniel purposed in his mind, in his heart, that he would not defile himself with the king's meat, because his parents had taught them. And that's why Solomon teaches us through Ecclesiastes that remember now thy creator in the days of thy youth, even as these men. And we're told, train up a child in Proverbs 22 and verse 8 in the way that he should go, that when he's old, when he gets to Babylon, he will never depart from the principles. And that's what happened to Daniel here and his three Hebrew friends. So they came to him and pampered the king in rhetoric. And he fell for it. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning furnace. There are certain Jews, and I would suspect that they would say there are certain black people down here that you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Some would say it is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You know, some have said that. O king, have not regard for thee. These men don't have any regard for you. They are not bowing down and they're not dancing. Now, these are the same men who were embarrassed because Daniel and his men had prayed for interpretation and had brought the interpretation to the king, and the king made them leaders over them. Remember, these are immigrants. And how often you hear people, even in America here, and in England and elsewhere, oh, these immigrants have come and taken away our job. It started a long time ago. So they didn't want immigrants to come in and be head over them. That's what they were saying. Let's read it again. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy deities, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. You see, if you don't know that an obelisk is a phallic symbol, then you will think it's something sacred. But Daniel and his friends, they knew what it was. And they said, we're not bowing. We're not dancing. Then Nebuchadnezzar, verse 13, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and this other Negro. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, not to serve my deities, nor worship in the golden image which I have set up? Now, you can detect from this that Nebuchadnezzar did not have any intent of killing these men, because the word says, in the hour that they are found not doing this, they should be killed. But he said, no, 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 bring them to me. And they brought them. Verse 15. Now, if you be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the obsequious symphony, the fawning symphony, Babylon's hip hop, when you hear it, just bow down, and dance, and you'll be okay in the kingdom. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in the matter. If it be so, our Elohim, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of the hand of the king. Now, as I indicated when I started, I said, life is so structured that it seems circumstances have imposed on us a flaming fire. You're either in it, you're either coming out of it, or you're going into it. And so the only person who can make sure you don't get burned is Yeshua. And these men knew. Why? Because they were able to see him through their what? Pineal gland. Remember, they went home and they prayed and they saw him. He delivered them. He showed them what the interpretation was. They were not in darkness like the Chaldeans, because their pineal gland is light unto them. And it is through that conscience, it is through the soul, that the light of Yeshua speaks to the conscience and you understand it. When the pineal gland doesn't have any light, the whole body is in darkness. So they were not like that. The word says, when Nebuchadnezzar tested these men, after 3 years, after their graduate degree, he found them 10 times more able, more erudite than his own people. And he put them in charge. But people don't like when immigrants are in charge. When you have, a Caribbean president, or whether you have an African prime minister, or you have an Indian prime, they don't like it at all. Many of them. So they were setting them up. Even though Daniel had saved their lives, they were now angry. And obviously, a law is made. What do we do with the law? It has to be seen to be working. So Nebuchadnezzar said, bring them here. And he's letting them know all you have to do when you hear that symphony orchestra plays, just dance, and we'll record it that you dance. They said, no, we're not going to do that. What? No, king, we're not doing it. Not doing it. That's English. We're not going to do that, king. Oh, king, where I come from, they would simply say, me not do it. That's what they would say. And so the king became angry. He said, even if Yah doesn't deliver us, we're not doing it. If it be so, our Elohim, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And if he will not deliver us out of thine hand, O king, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy deities, nor worship the golden image. We will not worship the obelisk. We'll not worship it. And as for the men who are dressed in tie, you saw the shape of the tie, don't you? I'll leave that for you to think on. So the king Nebuchadnezzar, full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore, he spake and commanded that they should eat the furnace 7 times more than it was to be eaten. Put it up. We're going to teach them a lesson. And they did. Verse 22. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished and rose up in haste and spake and said unto the counselors, did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, true, O king. He answered and said, lo, I see 4 men. They didn't see it. His pineal gland was now working. Are you with me? He was now seeing beyond the confines of his own insularity. I see one who looks like who? The son of Elohim. How did he know that? All the days he worshiped other Yahs, other Elohim, other gods. But now, just like Jacob, is at that point where he sees a 4th person in the fire, in our fire. That 4th person, that Yeshua, was among the slaves in America and in Britain. Swing low, sweet chariot. They knew. We wade in the water. Stay with me. When I look over yonder, they weren't looking with their eyes. They were looking with their pineal gland. When I look over yonder, what did I see? I saw a band of angels coming forth, the word says, to carry them home. Those songs were born out of experience. Now we are singing those songs in dance hall. No, you can't sing those songs in a strange land. You can't. You can't. You tell it to our singers in Hollywood and elsewhere, in London, Tell it to them. Can't do that. Did we not place 3 men? The ratio here is 3-1. 75% and 25%. Did we not place 3 men? Who then is the fourth? Nobody told him. Remember, a few years ago, he couldn't even understand what he had seen. Now he sees what nobody else is seeing. I see a fourth man. That's what the king says. And therefore, the king was astonished. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mount of the burning fiery furnace and spake. Did you hear that? You missed that. It says the men who put them in couldn't go near. But he comes near because Yah want him to see, and it didn't burn him either. He came to the furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High, Elohim. Did you get that? He's not referring to the Most High. Come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and the captains, and the king counselor, being gathered together. Again, they're embarrassed, you know. Again, these men are embarrassed, right? Because even though Daniel saved their lives, and now the 3 Hebrew boys now, they are trying to get them out because they're immigrants and they don't want any immigrants in their cabinet ruling over them. They don't want it. And we see the same kind of Nebuchadnezzar's attitude in politics all over the world today. Are you with me? We saw it in South Africa a few years ago when they put Nelson Mandela in prison. 27 years he served. Why? Because he wanted justice. We saw it in America. Our ancestors were lynched. Daniel was lynched. The 3 boys were lynched. They were brought down there in chains. We've got to understand that. And I'm letting you know also, the word says, they are planning to do this again. Revelation chapter 13 wants you to know that. So the question is, will you not call upon this fourth being, this fourth man? Why do you think he came in the 4th century? Why do you think he did that? Oh, yes, he came. And he delivered his people. And now he's saying, I'm going to have a second Exodus, and I want to deliver my people. He says, I'm going to round them up. I'm going to round them up. And I want to wrestle with them in thoughts, even as I wrestled with Jacob. So come with me to Zephaniah. Zephaniah chapter 3, and we will read verse 9 and 10. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of Yahweh to serve him with one accord. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. From beyond where? The rivers of Cush. From beyond the rivers of Cush, my suppliant, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. Did you hear that? He says, the people from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, these are his dispersed people. These are his scattered people. These are the people that went down to Babylon. These are the people that live in the empire of the Medes and the Persians. These are the descendants of the people who moved to America and moved to Britain. And as I indicated earlier, that there is a cuneiform tablet in the British Museum that indicates who these people are. So we ought to be thinking, if the British people know this, or at least the leaders, how then could the Balfour Agreement set the machinery in motion to take up people from Europe and to bring them to a land of Israel and tell the world that these people are Israelites, when the word speaks differently, when Moses have written differently? But come with me to Genesis chapter 9. Genesis 9. Or let's do Genesis 9, and we will read verse 27. And the word says, Elohim shall persuade Japheth. He shall what? Remember, we read earlier in chapter 10 in verse 3 that the Ashkenazi people, they are the descendants of Gomer. And Moses says they are Gentiles. Verse 27 in chapter 9 says, Elohim shall persuade Japheth that he may dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be a servant unto his brethren. Did you get that? So let's break that down so you get it. In chapter 10 of Genesis, we read that the Japhethites are the mixed people of the Asian people from the Caucasus Mountain. These are the Caucasian. He says these are the Gentiles. That's the word, so let's not argue against it. Yah spoke, and Moses wrote. I just read. So we get that. So if Japheth from 3 sons represents a Gentile, then it suggests, by way of logical deduction, that Shem and Am are not so. So we read that the British people, through the Balfour, pick up these people and bring them over and said, these are the Gentiles. And now we're watching Gaza on fire. I said that we are all in a fire. The fire is here. And when you're in a fire, you must expect he who is a consuming fire and he who is the living water to put out the fire. And so he came among the Negroes that were in Babylon, Daniel, Meshach, and his other friends, and he stood in the fire with them. Had Yah not been in the fire with the slaves of America and in Britain, they could never have survived 400 years of beastful living by the oppressors. Could not have happened. So, who then is the fourth man? Who is the fourth man? The fourth man is none other than Yeshua. And he's pleading, even at this hour, come out of her, my people. Come out. Because Babylon is fallen. Not physical Babylon now, Mr. Babylon. Come out. And so we'll close on this. Revelation 18. It's one of our must-read texts. I think it ought to be required reading. Revelation chapter 18. And let me just explain. It matters not what denomination you belong to or what institution you belong to, what church you belong to. It matters not. Whether you be a Baptist, a Seventh-day Adventist, Episcopalian, Jehovah's Witness, Catholic, whatever. It doesn't matter. Categorically, you are put in one category, and you represent an era called Laodicea. That's what the word says. You are all Laodicean. Okay? So your label won't change that. And let me just, before I read Revelation 18, tell you your condition, Laodicean's condition. It says in chapter 3, in verse 14, and unto the messenger of the assembly of Laodicea. Notice assembly, meaning all the denomination assemble, singular, in one place. In one place in terms of how Yah sees you on the earth. You're all one, because he only has one flock. Right? And unto the messenger of the assembly of Laodicea write, these things said I am, the faithful and the true witness, the beginning of the creation of Yahweh. I know your works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. It's speaking to all the churches. You're neither cold nor hot. I would that you were hot or cold. I wish. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew you out of my mouth. You make me vomit. That's the essence of the statement here. Because thou sayest, I am rich and increase with goods and have need of none. Yes, you're rich, and your church is mega, 10,000, 12,000, 20,000 membership. Yeah, all of that is true. And knowest, but you knowest not that thou art wretched. You're wretched. You're miserable, you're poor, and you're blind, and you're naked. Your pineal gland is not working. So with that kind of condition, we need to understand what Yah is saying. So come now with chapter 18 and verse 4. He says, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people. Come out of what? Come out of Laodicea. That you may not be partakers of her sin, and that he receive not her plagues. Laodicea is going to receive plagues. And you think that's strange? Then you need to go to Shiloh according to Jeremiah 7 and verse 12 and see where his name was, and he tore that tabernacle down. Did he also not call Nebuchadnezzar to tear down Solomon's temple? He did tore that down. Did he not call Titus or cause him to tear down the second temple that was built by Herod? So why do you find it strange? It says, don't remain in there and be caught up with her sins, because plague is coming. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and Yahweh hath remembered her iniquities. So come with me now to verse 22 and verse 23. And the voice of the harpers, did you hear me? And the musicians and the pipers and the trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. Whether you were listening to Nebuchadnezzar's obsequious band or not, or your own contrived way of worshiping, he said it will cease. It shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee, and the sound of the millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of the candle, the pineal light of that candle, shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom, Yeshua. You won't hear it. They're not preaching it, his voice. And the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee, for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by their sorceries, by their deceits, by their drug pushing and dispensing, that's what the word says, were all nations deceived. Come out. Come out. But the church, like a cat, looks into the mirror and thinks that it is a lion. Come out. Let me close on this. I keep threatening you to close. But we read in Revelation 1. You better come with me. Revelation 1, and we're going to read from verse, let's try 12. And I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. Laodicea being the last of those candlesticks. They represent the churches in different era, the assembly in different era. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed in garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hair were like wool. Did you see that? That's the Messiah. His hair is like wool, like mine. As white as snow, because he's the Ancient of Days. And his eyes were as a flaming fire, and his feet like unto brass, as if they were burned in a furnace, and his voice as a sound of many waters. He has brown skin like me. That's what the word says. And those who don't like it, they can get angry like the Chaldeans did get angry with my ancestor Daniel. So we saw that at that time, he is in the midst of the churches, the midst of the candlesticks. So come with me now to Revelation 3, and let's look at verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. What? Yes. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to him and will sup with him and he with me. So at the start, in the assembly of Ephesus, we saw him in the midst of the assembly. Now at the end of time, he says, I'm outside, I'm knocking. What would cause the Messiah to leave the midst of the assembly and is outside knocking? He tells you, I don't like what's going on. He said, the people are blind. Their pineal gland is not working, at least not as effectively and efficiently as it should. Come out. They're naked. They're not wearing my righteousness. They are wretched. They love money than they love righteousness because they prefer mammon, and they glory in their wealth. Come out. So the question that emerges from this, if the Messiah has left the assembly and he's outside, what are you doing inside? May you ponder that thought, and may you put your reasoning to good use by way of the use of your pineal gland, even as Jacob did. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.